The night began like a scene written with gentle hands, a night too calm for the chaos it was destined to hold, a night too silent for the secrets buried beneath its heartbeat. The production studio breathed with the warmth of creative people, humming machines, glowing stage lights, and a pair of stars who shone far brighter than anything electricity could offer. That night should have been ordinary, but fate had already chosen a different script, one stitched with tension, hidden truth, and a darkness waiting to swallow everything whole. And so the night bowed to a coming storm, carrying a whisper meant to fade. Yulong arrived unusually early enough to raise suspicion, early enough to leave the staff confused, early enough for destiny to tilt. He moved through the hallway with deliberate steps, each one echoing louder than it should have, each one carved with an urgency he tried so hard to hide. His eyes were sharp but tired, his breath slow but heavy, and tucked into the inner pocket of his velvet coat was an envelope that refused to lie flat. It pulsed like a living thing, as if guarding a secret too fragile to speak aloud. And even the walls sensed the weight of his intent, like a cage preparing to break. He placed the envelope beneath the third spotlight on stage 4, slipping it beneath the metal plate where the light met the floorboard. It was a hiding place only someone who lived in the studio would know, an invisible pocket, unnoticed, unlit, untouched by the curious. He whispered something under his breath afterward. It was short, sharp, and sounded like a countdown only he could hear. A camera in the upper corner caught the motion, but the audio recorded nothing but the hum of lights warming overhead. For even the cameras chose silence, afraid to echo what truth might shake. Young Mei Mei entered later, glowing like she carried her own halo. Her hair clung lightly to the silk collar of her jacket, and her smile cracked like the first note of a distant melody. She spotted Yulong instantly, she always did, though she tried to pretend her gaze simply wandered. But the camera caught it, the kind of look that could move an entire fandom into a frenzy, the kind of look that made directors sigh because chemistry like that couldn't be directed. Had to be lived. And her footsteps carried a rhythm her heart couldn't fake. Rehearsal began with innocent normalcy. Soft cues, quiet laughter, gentle rehearsing of lines that no longer needed to be rehearsed. But beneath their spoken words lurked something unsaid, a craving tension that rose whenever they stood too close. The crew joked about it often. Nothing malicious, just the kind of teasing that grew when two stars burned too brightly around each other. But even the teasing felt softer that night, weaker, as though everyone in the room sensed a shift in the air. And the silence beneath their laughter whispered of storms soon to wake. 15 minutes into rehearsal, the storm outside snapped the sky open. Lightning spat against the windows, thunder coiled through the building, and the lights above them flickered. Once, twice, before bursting back with a glare that felt like a warning. Mei Mei paused mid-step, her script trembling against her fingers. Yulong's eyes lifted slightly, catching the tremor in the bulbs. He knew something was coming. He felt it breaking through the seams of the night. And the shadows at the edges of the stage deepened as if tasting fear's ache. The power outage struck without mercy. A single electric scream. Then darkness swallowed everything whole. A pitch black so thick it felt physical. A darkness that clung to their skin and wrapped around their breaths. The crew muttered. Someone cursed. Chair fell. But through all the noise, only one voice broke clearly through the dark. Mei Mei. Are you okay? His voice was the one steady thing in a collapsing world. Mei Mei moved toward it instantly, guided not by sight but by instinct, by memory, by a trust she never dared speak aloud. She reached forward blindly until her fingers brushed the sleeve of his coat. Relief melted through her, softening her stiff shoulders. Yulong caught her wrist gently, pulling her close enough that her forehead nearly touched his collarbone. And the darkness listened closely, feeding on every tremble their hearts would make. The emergency exit light flickered to life, casting a dim golden glow across the room. That single light, barely bright enough to reveal silhouettes, captured the first forbidden moment. Mei Mei leaning into Yulong shielding her from the unknown lurking in the black, their breaths rising together in synchronized fear and longing. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't meant to be seen. But the camera caught every second. For even in darkness, truth will always find a way to break. Then Yulong whispered 2 words that would haunt the footage forever. "They're here." Mei Mei's body stiffened. Her fingers curled into his coat. Her heartbeat became a frantic drum against the silence. The camera, grainy and struggling to adjust to the dim light, captured her trembling breath. Someone or something moved above them across the metal catwalk suspended near the ceiling. The sound was slow, heavy, intentional. Not a loose cable. Not a wandering crew member. It was the sound of someone watching. And the ceiling creaked beneath footsteps carved from dread and stake. Suddenly, a faint red dot slid across the far wall. Quick, sharp, precise. Mei Mei's eyes widened. Yulong stepped in front of her instinctively. The red dot disappeared. But the damage was already done. Their fear had been tasted. Their vulnerability recorded. The studio, once a place of creation, felt like a trap ready to snap shut. Mei Mei whispered, "Yulong, what did you do?" But the answer in his silence screamed louder than words. And the air around them curled tighter, like a rope drawn taut with quake. What the footage captured next became the most replayed moment of all time. An accidental masterpiece of danger, tension, and forbidden affection. Mei Mei reached up and touched the side of Yulong's face. Not in fear, not in confusion, but in the soft, intimate way of someone anchoring herself to the only person she trusted in the dark. Yulong closed his eyes briefly, leaning into her palm for a fraction of a second. That fraction became legend. And their silhouettes burned into the lens, like 2 souls caught between choice and break. Flash. A metallic crash. A crackle of electricity bursting from the corner of the studio. The shadow moved. A human shape, tall, lean, cloaked in black, flickered in the far left frame. Only for a moment. Only long enough for anyone watching the footage to know the darkness hadn't lied. Mei Mei gasped. Yulong grabbed her waist, pulling her behind him with a ferocity that revealed the depth of his fear. Or perhaps the depth of his love. And the studio groaned beneath a presence built from secrets too sharp to take. Crew members outside the frame screamed for engineers. Someone called for backup generators. Another yelled that the breaker box was smoking. The emergency light flickered again, shrinking, swelling, dying, returning, like it couldn't decide whether to hold on to life or fade. In one of the flickers, the shadow disappeared. In the next, it was closer. Too close. Mei Mei clutched Yulong's coat, whispering his name repeatedly, each whisper thinner, weaker, trembling. Yulong didn't flinch. He didn't blink. His eyes locked on the dark corner where the figure last stood. And the camera trembled slightly, caught between truth and the terror it would stake. Finally, the emergency light surged fully alive again. White, bright, blinding. In that instant, Yulong and Mei Mei were already separated by several feet, standing apart like nothing had happened. But everything had. Their expressions tried to settle into normalcy, but the tremor beneath their smiles betrayed them. Someone had stolen the envelope. Yulong knew it. Mei Mei sensed it. And the camera caught the realization spreading across their faces like a slow poison. And the footage sealed the moment, marking the night as one darkness refused to forsake. The stolen envelope was only the beginning. The shadow in the footage was only a warning. The blackout was only a test. Because from the moment the lights returned, so did the watchers. Hidden behind screens, cloaked behind motives, gripping the truth Yulong had tried so hard to hide. And as the cameras rolled, capturing the 2 stars pretending nothing had changed, destiny rewrote their ending with hands too cold for mercy. For once a secret is stolen, fate sharpens, preparing the cut it's destined to make. And that was the night the world stopped seeing Yulong and young Mei Mei as actors on a stage. It was the night the forbidden footage revealed the truth. They were targets. They were hunted. They were gripping a secret someone would kill to take. And the cameras, traitorous, loyal, silent, unblinking, captured the moment everything began to break. For the truth had awakened, and shadows do not sleep once given a taste to take. The light that returned after the blackout did not feel like rescue. Felt like interrogation. Harsh. Too bright. The kind of light that exposed tremors beneath the skin and secrets behind the eyes. Yulong stood still at center stage, trying to regulate his breathing, trying not to let the crew see the panic clawing at the edges of his calm. Across from him, young Mei Mei's hands were still shaking, barely subtly, but enough for anyone watching closely to know something had gone very, very wrong. But the others weren't watching closely. Only the cameras were. Cameras never blink. A boom mic operator cursed at the control booth. A lighting assistant blamed the storm. The director shouted something about backup batteries and deadlines. Everyone tried to explain the blackout in ordinary ways, because ordinary explanations felt safer. Yulong knew better. He could still feel the shadow's presence like a cold fingerprint on the back of his neck. Mei Mei sensed it too. He could tell by the way her eyes stayed fixed on the far left corner, the same place the dark figure had appeared. She swallowed, wetting her lips, and turned slightly toward him. Yulong, that person, did you see? He cut her off with the smallest shake of his head. Not now. Not with so many ears. Not with cameras recording again. Not with danger watching. Mei Mei understood immediately. She forced a smile. Too quick, too thin, and tucked her hair behind her ear, pretending to recover from the scare. The director exhaled in relief, clapped twice, and called everyone back to position. Let's run scene 12 again. Scene 12. Ironically, the romantic confession scene. A cruel joke from fate. Mei Mei took her mark on the right side of the stage. Yulong walked to his on the left. The distance between them felt longer than it should have, stretched by fear and silence. Yet something tethered them. Something invisible but unbreakable. Envelope. Whoever took it was either still here, or close enough to return. The cameras rolled. The clapperboard snapped. The lights dimmed into the warm glow programmed for the scene. Action. Mei Mei lifted her face toward him, ready to deliver the scripted line. But her voice caught. Not because she forgot the words. Because someone had moved in the shadows of the upper balcony. Again. She wasn't supposed to look away from him during this scene, but her eyes flickered upward in a split-second reflex. Yulong noticed instantly. Without breaking character, he stepped closer to her. Too close for the scene at this moment, close enough that the director frowned slightly. Close enough to block her view of the balcony. Close enough for him to murmur through barely parted lips. Don't look up. Stay with me. His voice wasn't tender. It was a warning. Warm breath brushed her cheek. Her pulse stumbled. The cameras caught it. Millions would later analyze it frame by frame, calling it the most intimate, unscripted moment of their careers. But this wasn't romance. This was survival masquerading as affection. Mei Mei inhaled shakily. Yulong, we should stop. He covered her hand with his. Still in character, still acting for the audience he could not see but knew existed. Trust me, he whispered. Just stay close. The director, thinking it was improvisation for emotional effect, nodded approvingly. Good choice, Yulong. Keep going. Not a choice. Plea. They continued the scene, but every step, every line, every breath trembled with the knowledge that someone was watching. Someone who wasn't part of the crew. Someone who moved with purpose, not permission. At the line where their characters were meant to stand only inches apart, Yulong leaned closer, lowering his head slightly as though preparing for the scripted emotional exchange. But his eyes weren't on her. They were scanning the shadows behind her. His jaw tightened. He saw movement again. Not a shadow. Not a trick of the light. Person. Tilting. Deliberate. The figure shifted left, disappearing behind a pillar. Yulong gently pressed the back of his hand to Mei Mei's, circling it with his thumb in a way that seemed romantic on camera but was actually a silent command. Move. He pivoted them both a step to the right, out of the figure's line of sight, but into the lighting cue for the next part of the scene. The lights flared gold around them, creating a halo that made the moment look breathtaking on camera. Directors watching later would call it genius. Fans would call it destiny. Investigators would call it a signal. Only Yulong and Mei Mei knew it was necessity. Cut! The director called out. Relief rippled through the room. Crew members began to scatter, adjusting props and prepping for the next shot. The moment the attention shifted, Mei Mei exhaled sharply, stepping back from him. Yulong, she whispered urgently. Tell me what's going on. What was in that envelope? His eyes slid toward the upper balcony. See now. Whoever had been there was gone. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. There are things I should have told you. He stopped. A sound echoed through the rafters. 3 taps. Like, low. Consistent. Mei Mei's blood ran cold. That wasn't the storm. No, Yulong said. It wasn't. The taps stopped as quickly as they started. Yulong grabbed her hand. Not romantically, not gently, but with a grip forged from urgency. We need to get out of this studio. Mei Mei didn't argue. Fear had already cracked open her composure. They slipped behind the curtains, moving quickly but not enough to draw suspicion. Yulong led her through the backstage corridor, their footsteps echoing through the narrow passage lit only by red emergency bulbs.